thought, how did you get free from what you got free from? How did you overcome pornography? How did you overcome suicide? How did you overcome all this stuff? And I just find again and again that the only answer I can really give is that I fell in love with Jesus.
Yes.
And all I can say that happened to me is that I fell so in love with Jesus that my appetite for God exploded, and I found a grace to say no to the things of the world. That I so fell in love with Jesus, in a back corner of an auditorium with nobody looking and with not all the pumping crowds and all that stuff. I simply fell in love with Jesus, and I found a grace in that love to say no to sin. By the time I grew up my whole life a pastor's son, and by the time I was about 13 years old, 13 from about really 12 to about 15 or 16 years old, I went through a period of severe depression in my life. And that depression came from the fact that I began a secret lifestyle of sin that nobody knew about, my parents didn't know about, my siblings didn't know about, but I began looking at pornography on the internet and through different things like that. And my addiction to pornography got so bad that I would lie to my mom on weekends and say I was sick so I wouldn't have to go to my grandmother's house. And I would just stay home and spend hours upon hours looking at pornography on the computer. And after I was done doing that, the guilt and the hopelessness that so weighed upon me, I would just go to my room and just lay there on my bed, so depressed and wishing I had the courage to commit suicide. But I knew if I did it, I would go straight to hell. And I began to surround myself with things. I became fascinated with death and with suicide. I began to just put up posters of my room of bands like Nirvana and people like Kurt Cobain. I began to read their biographies, people that had committed suicide. They became idols to me. They became things that I was just fascinated by and just glued to. I just read about them all the time and listened to their music, but began to write songs like they wrote songs and play on my guitar in my room by myself and singing about how I wish I could have the courage to commit suicide. But one day my mom was praying. She was in a place of prayer, and she felt the Holy Spirit say to her, you're doing an awful lot to make sure your kids are popular in school, but what are you doing to make sure they're spiritual giants? And then she felt God prick on her heart, your son Micah is dying. So immediately after that, she began to do some things, and she took me to this little storefront across the church, where she heard that, across the street, where she heard that God was moving, that revival was breaking out, that kids' lives were getting changed. And so she took me to that little storefront meeting, and I'm telling you what, I hated being there. She took me there against my will. But when she took me there all during worship went on forever, as you can imagine, like it has here, this weekend. Worship just went on forever. We 45 minutes singing the same song over and over. And I hated being there. But at the same time that I hated being there, I felt the love of God drawing me. And I just saw even a vision in my head that I was in a dungeon. I had chains bound upon me. And I looked up, and I was looking up out of the dungeon. I could see a door open. And I knew that God was saying to me that He wanted to set me free. And so I was there in that meeting. I felt the love of God drawing me. And as I was doing that, there came an opportunity to run down to the altar. And I'm telling you, I found myself, I was so scared because I knew my mom was there. And I didn't know that she knew anything was wrong with me. But I found the courage, I found myself running down to the altar. And when I got down to the altar, I felt the love of God pour out in my life. Jesus, His love poured out on top of me. I'm telling you, in a moment, the weight of sin and depression and suicide and guilt and shame, it all broke in a moment as with tears were running down my cheeks. I just lifted up my hands and began to call out on God. I'm telling you, that moment started a journey in me that now it's been over 6 years and I've not looked at one pornographic image. It's been over 6 years that I've not masturbated one time. Over 6 years, and the love of God is as strong in my life as it's ever been. And I've walked this thing out for real. And I want to tell you that that can happen to you. Yeah. That you can so get a blinding revelation of who Jesus is and so fall in love with Jesus that you never go back to the stuff that used to entice you.